Welcome back, weirdos! So, today's video is basically going to be a reading recap of what I read in February and then a lot of me rambling about what I plan on reading in March. So, March is TBR, I guess. And I also want to, at the end of this video, talk a little bit about some of the horror movies that I watched last month as well. Just because they were so amazing. So, bear with me. This may be a bumpy ride because you guys know how much I love to talk. So let's get into this. So first up for February, I read A Darling Obsession by S.R. Murray. So here's the cover of this book. I know the light kind of causes a lot of shine. I'm not going to get into what the book is about per se because I did already cover this book in the last reading recap and talked a little bit about what it is about. You can also look me up on Goodreads to check out my official review of it. Okay, I'm gonna preface this with the fact that normally I probably would have never picked this book up because I don't usually read books that are more like mystery detective type books. So normally I would not have picked up a book like this, and not because it's anything that I think is bad. It's just not my typical type of book. It's not like a smut romance and it's not like overtly horror. It is within the horror genre. I will definitely give it that. There's a little bit of a thriller aspect to it. There's definitely some mystery involved, but it's very much like a detective type story. I am, however, really happy that I read it. Now, Mr. Murray, the author, actually reached out to me on Instagram and asked me if I would be interested in reading it and then reviewing it, which I've already posted reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. So this is my official review for the YouTube channel for all like 12 of you who watch my videos. Anyway, so this book was a doozy on my emotions. It is very disturbing, actually. It is very disturbing. You get a taste of so many different perspectives in this one little book that at times it can get a little bit confusing. At times it did get a little jumpy with the timeline, and it just seemed a little abrupt in places where I wanted a little bit more explanation. But that's fine. Like, I mean, it is what it is. I enjoyed it. The one thing that really fucked me up during the first half of this book is reading from the perspective of a pedophile. That shit really triggered me. So yes, there are a lot of content warnings, a lot of trigger warnings for this particular book. I was so disturbed by that particular perspective that I put this book down for about 2 weeks because it really grossed me out. It really just made me feel blah to read anything from that perspective. And I almost didn't pick it back up again, but knowing that Mr. Murray really wanted my opinion on the book, I was like, you know what, you can suck it up and deal with this. I have most likely way more disturbing books to come about this year, so I'm not that worried about it. I did finish the book, and honestly, I had a good time. There was a very shocking scene towards the end of the book that I was not expecting, that I was definitely not prepared for. All in all, this is very much not a feel-good book. I felt like the ending was alright. All in all, this wasn't my cup of tea. There's nothing about the writing itself or the story per se that put me off other than what I've already discussed. It's just, I don't know, it was a little too disturbing from from a perspective of just like your normal everyday kind of psycho. I wanted there to be a little bit more of a supernatural and paranormal influence in this book, but you do get a little bit of a taste of it here and there. So all in all, I think I rated this book a 3 out of 5. I don't really remember. I'll have to check my Goodreads to be 100% sure. But this was a very brutal ride. There's a lot of shit that goes on in this book that is going to make you question your belief in humanity, if you even have any faith in humanity anymore. I don't. But this book will definitely take that faith from you in a heartbeat. So, yeah. Most of the characters in this book also are not so much lovable. There's a lot of assholes in this book. There's a lot of questionable people with very immoral viewpoints. So just be prepared to feel a little icky once you're done with this book, because I sure did. But it definitely is a story that stays with you. If you enjoy, like, I won't say like murder mysteries per se, but yeah, in essence, if you enjoy mysteries, if you enjoy having like a lot of different perspectives to immerse yourself in a story, then this is definitely a book worth checking out, in my opinion. So there's that. The next book that I read for February was actually an audiobook, and it was The Cases That Haunt Us. I do own that book. It's somewhere packed away in storage at this point. But I saw that on Audible. I don't remember if it was free. I think it was actually included because it's an Amazon Prime catalog or whatnot. But anyway, The Cases That Haunt Us is written by John Douglas and an actual author who he uses for most of his books. It was a really interesting read, dude, and I'm honestly glad that I did the audiobook instead of trying to read it hard copy, because with books like that I tend to get very bored with some of the like almost textbook feel to it. So being able to listen to it on the long drives to work and back was actually really awesome, and it kept my interest for sure. It's basically where John Douglas goes over some of the more famous or infamous cold cases, unsolved mysteries and murders, such as Jack the Ripper and stuff like that, and gives kind of a modern profiler viewpoint of who he believes the killer could have been, and just like different options of looking at those cases in a more forensically inclined viewpoint. I think I just made up words, guys. I'm pretty sure I just made up words. But anyway, I thought it was really interesting. But again, if you're not so much into true crime and you're not so much into psychology, then you're probably going to get really bored with this book. So yeah, there is that. But it was fascinating to me. The next book that I finished in February was Her Soul to Take by Harley LaRue, or is it LaRue? I'm not entirely sure. Holy shit. I was not prepared to fall so much in love with this book, the characters in the story, as I did. I was definitely not prepared for that. This book was kind of explained to me as demon porn, and I was here for the demon porn. I'm fine with that. Gotta love some monster porn. Yes. So I was just expecting like non-stop sex scenes with a demon involved. And while you do get plenty of steamy, smoky demon porn, the characters are actually really fucking lovable. The storyline was actually really interesting. There are some horror elements to this that I was not expecting and that I very much appreciated. I just loved it. I just really loved it. I was actually emotionally captivated by our lead characters. And I am going to be reading the other books in this series. Now, if you are interested in picking this up and you fall in love with it like I do, just know that the series is not like a step-by-step book. From what I understand, you can actually read any of them in the series as a standalone, because they're just from different couples who are involved. So I have the second one that was released on its way, and I'm so very excited to be reading more about that couple. But this was really good. The chapters were short. The language was very like moderately difficult. It was definitely not a difficult read at all. I loved it. Honestly, I loved it. So yeah, 4 out of 5 at least, maybe a 5 out of 5, but definitely a 4 out of 5, without a doubt. The next book that I read in February was called The Joyful Vegan. I'm not gonna go too much into that because it's pretty self-explanatory. That was another one that was included in Audible for the Amazon Prime catalog that they have. It was free. I went ahead and listened to it just because I am trying to transition over to veganism, and it helps me stay motivated to listen to some animal rights and vegan audiobooks every now and then. So I really enjoyed it. It was very positive. It was very light. It wasn't a super heavy negative read like a lot of animal rights books are. So it was nice. It was awesome. Loved it. The next book that I read for February is The Dead of Winter by the amazing Keelan Patrick Burke. Now this is a collection of short stories. It's very tiny. It was a very easy book to get through. These stories are short. Like I'm talking like maybe 1 or 2 pages short. Like they are fucking short. Now I will give kind of a content warning on some of these stories. They deal with a lot of grief. There's some loss. There is some, I won't say suicide trigger warnings per se, but there's definitely some depression that is portrayed in a very like dark, horror-inspired setting. So if you're already going through a lot of shit right now, I honestly would put this on the shelf. Maybe wait till next winter. Just saying, because I finished this book and it kind of put me a little bit in a downer for a while. Very dark, but very beautiful. Keelan Patrick Burke has a way of writing that is just very haunting, but beautiful. You know, it's weird. It's like grotesque beauty. I know it doesn't make sense, but that's really the only 2 words I can think of to describe his writing. So I loved it. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Definitely inspired me a lot. I don't normally like short story collections, but this one really hit me in the feels. I felt quite a lot for the characters involved in each story. So that was awesome. The last hard copy book that I read and finished in February is called Black Tongue and Other Anomalies by Richard Beauchamp, or Beauchamp. I still haven't figured out how to say his name. I was not expecting the level of disturbing awesomeness that this short story collection delivered. Normally in a short story collection, I can rate it like a 4 out of 5 or even lower, depending on how many of the stories in there I actually liked. Because in any short story collection, you're guaranteed to like a few, love a couple, and kind of bleh the others. I loved every single one of these. Like, loved. And there are a couple in there that were so fucking good that I really want this author to just magically expand on those stories, make a series out of them. They need to make a fucking TV show out of some of them. There are some stories in here that are freaking amazing. I don't even know how to describe it. Like, I really don't. And each story is so different from the others. You know, like you got a little bit of cosmic horror here, some isolation horror there, some native folklore inspired stories in here. And it's amazing. Now, don't get me wrong. There were some stories in here that made me like almost vomit because they hit so hard on some of my worst fears in life, which usually involves a lot of body horror. So this book fucked me up, but in such a good way that I had to give it like a 5 out of 5 because it was so fucking good. I was not expecting this to be as good as it was, and it really blew me away. So do with that knowledge what you will. So the last 2 books that I finished for February were audiobooks. One was called Demonic Foes. If you have been watching my channel since the beginning, I first started out with a demonology series. I love demonology. I'm very fascinated by it. No, I'm not a demonologist. I'm definitely not a professional in the area. I'm not like an academic or whatever they call themselves. But I do love researching the topic and learning about the topic. So I did decide to listen to Demonic Foes. I purchased it with my Audible credit for last month, and it was really interesting. Now, Demonic Foes is more from a perspective of a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I can't remember. He is a doctor, though. The author is a doctor. And it's from his perspective, more of a clinical, psychological perspective of demonic possession cases, and cases that he truly believes were authentic and real. The pieces of this book where he actually explains like the differences between demonic possession versus schizophrenia and other types of psychological issues was fascinating to me. However, the author tends to get very preachy in certain areas of this book, to the point where it was really causing me some irritation. We'll just leave it at that. I was getting really irritated because it was like I wanted this book to be scientific and clinical only. I didn't want the added like judgment and like specifically Christian focused perspective. And don't get me wrong, I know most books, if not all, I will say most, I know that most books written about demonic possession come from a Christian, more specifically a Catholic perspective, because that is the prime religion who A, believes in demonic possession, and B, has actual ordained exorcists, right? So there are other religions that believe in demonic possession and practice exorcism, but in the Catholic Christian faith, there's actually like specific people that you go to who specialize in this area, right? So some parts of the book just got a little bit too preachy for me. He seems to just kind of jump onto the bandwagon of, oh, if you look into the occult at all, then you could get possessed, or oh, if you don't follow a specifically Christian path, then you're more vulnerable to possession. And I just don't believe that. Like, I personally just don't believe that. I'm not Christian. I have fucked around many a time with Ouija boards. I practice with tarot cards. I do all sorts of stuff. I do not mess around with Ouija boards anymore, just because I do believe there is some risk in using them. But I do not believe that just because I'm not a Christian, that makes me more vulnerable to demonic possession. And I don't like how that part, the spiritual part of the process, was portrayed in the book. But everything else was fascinating, so I will give it that. And the last audiobook that I listened to for February was Pride and Prejudice. Because why not? Because why not? We're in the month of love. Might as well listen to a classic romance, right? And it was awesome. I mean, honestly, the movie with Keira Knightley was so spot on for this book. I had to go and watch it immediately after I finished the book. And it was very spot on. Like, I really enjoyed the book. I'm glad that I listened to it instead of actually tried to read it, because it is very dry. It is a very slow burn. So there's that. But that's it, guys. That is all that I read / listened to for February. Now let's jump into what I plan on reading for March. Now, obviously there's going to be plenty of audiobooks in my future because, like I've mentioned before, I travel quite a bit for work. So I don't have any like plan of which audiobooks I'm going to listen to. I'm just going to let the chips fall where they may on that. But as far as hard copies, I've actually already started it, and I am planning on reading Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. I have heard very contradicting reports and opinions on this book. So Jordaline from Jordaline Reads absolutely hated it, but several other booktubers that I follow have said that it scared the shit out of them, that they loved it. I've only read the prologue, and it was very creepy. I'm not gonna lie, the prologue was really creepy. But that's all I've read so far, so I don't really have an opinion on anything else as of right now. But this sounds really interesting, you guys. It sounds really interesting. It sounds like a creature feature, which you guys know that I absolutely love. So I am excited to read this one. I've already started it. The second book that I plan on reading is the third and last book in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and that is Ruin and Rising. So I have read the first and second books in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, so now it's time for the third. Now, the first book was actually awesome. Shadow and Bone, spot on. The second book, which was Siege and Storm, had a strong beginning and a strong ending, but the middle was trash and it was boring as fuck. So I'm really hoping that this book is not trash, that it's not boring, and that it wraps up the trilogy in a nice, solid way. And I know that these are not the only books in the Grishaverse, and I do actually have the other books that are in the Grishaverse, so I do plan on reading those eventually. But I definitely wanted to make sure that I wrap up this trilogy during 2022. So yeah, I'm excited to read that one. And the third and final hard copy book that I plan on reading is actually an older book. It's a used book that came in one of my Abominable Book Club boxes. And it's called One Rainy Night by Richard Lehman. So yeah, you can see my copy's a little beat to hell, but I love it. And honestly, it sounds interesting. Almost like a supernatural pandemic type thing. So I'm excited for it. I don't know what it will entail or anything like that. I've never really heard anything about it, but I have been wanting to dive into some of the older books that I have, the used books that I haven't really been giving a chance lately. And yeah, that's pretty much my March TBR, guys. What books are you guys planning on reading this month? What books did y'all read last month? What are y'all inspired to dive into as far as reading goes? Answer down below in the comments. Okay guys, if y'all were just here for the books, you can go ahead and click off of this video. I won't blame you, not a bit, but I did want to talk about a couple of things that I watched last month. So for February, there are 2 movies that I want to talk about briefly here at the end. The first one being the Texas Chainsaw Massacre that premiered on Netflix. It was alright. It was okay. I'm not gonna lie. So I actually hated the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I'm gonna tell you why. It was actually a pretty decent movie overall, but the last half of that fucking movie is basically our main chick running around screaming, and she does not shut up, and she does not stop screaming. And so eventually I'm waiting for Leatherface to just fucking kill her, eat her, whatever you gotta do just to shut her the fuck up, because I'm getting annoyed. So yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of the first one. This Texas Chainsaw Massacre was alright. It was adequate. But it did definitely feel like that franchise was trying to mimic the Halloween franchise with the whole like, we're gonna forget about the other attempts at rebooting it and we're just gonna like squish them together. Yeah, they were not nearly as successful doing that as the Halloween franchise was, in my opinion. But it was alright. Like, there were definitely some brutal kills, some really awesome gore scenes that I was not expecting, and I enjoyed it. For sure. The second movie, the main movie that I really wanted to talk to you guys about was The Cursed. When I say this movie blew me away, it fucking blew me away. I was not prepared for it to be that fucking good. When this movie comes out on DVD, I'm buying it on DVD, I'm buying it on Blu-ray, I don't give a fuck. I will have all the copies. So help me. I've been waiting for a movie like this for a while. We're talking about a brand new, fresh, beautiful perspective of werewolves. Yes, we're talking about creature feature, but also like some very terrifying body horror. Now, there are plenty of things that could have been a little better with the movie or could have been explained better, but honestly, I just love it for what it is. I love the experience. I loved the actors, the storyline. I just loved it. The cinematography was absolutely beautiful. The atmosphere of the movie, the music scores, the practical effects of the creature. You don't really see movies that are creature features use practical effects as well as this movie has anymore, because everybody relies so much on CGI and computer effects. These practical effects were bomb as fuck. I don't care how cringy I sound saying that, it was awesome. I freaking loved it. I loved the gore. I loved that they tied this story to a legitimate historical event that took place. I just, the cryptid lover in me, the horror lover in me just geeked the fuck out during this entire movie, and I loved the experience so much. So if you have not given The Cursed a chance, I highly encourage you to give it a chance, because holy shit balls, it was fantastic. Other than that, guys, I have sat here and rambled forever about what I read for February, about what I want to read for March, and about what I watched last month that was awesome. So let me know what you guys think. If you made it this far in the video, you know to drop me that little black heart emoji in the comments down below, and just let me know how y'all are doing out there. the world is a scary place right now. So let's just read books and pretend we don't exist in this reality. Anyway, love you all. Hope you guys are being safe out there, and I will see you next time.